Power on.
Real-time Sovryn is go.
Woo, just coming off doing some lysergic acid diethylamide. Excuse me. That was a bad one. No, really. I mean, maybe not just coming off of that, because you don't just come off of that. But wow, what an experience. Maybe something I will talk about in a future episode. But that is not what we are here to talk about. We are here to talk about a day that will live in infamy. No, it's not what you think. I know this is coming out on January 20th, but no, it's not that. Don't feed that machine. The machine you might want to feed, though, is the one that we're actually here to talk about, and that is the announcement of the Nintendo Switch 2. It was a bit of a surprise announcement, even though there were rumors going around. Of course, the Switch 2 has been like the rumor mill of all time. But there are rumors going around. I remember catching like a couple weeks ago that the announcement could end up happening on Thursday, January 16th. And that's actually exactly what happened. The trailer, there was a trailer drop, a trailer which is already over some 25 million views, I think, on YouTube. But there was a trailer drop for the Switch 2. Now, in some ways, the trailer told us things. In other ways, it really didn't tell us much at all. It did confirm some of the rumors coming around. And look, let's talk about this for a second, okay? I mean, the best thing to come out of this, really, is just that the rumor mill at least can somewhat stop, because there are so many people who just thrived online on saying, oh yeah, the Switch 2 is coming, the announcement's coming, this, that, whatever. Okay. And it got to be too much. I mean, I can remember even before Twitter was X and owned by Asshat, hashtag Switch 2 would trend over and over and over again, or hashtag Switch Pro or whatever. And I mean, it's just such a relief to finally have that cycle fucking stop. Drove me up the goddamned wall. Because in one sense, who the hell cares until Nintendo actually says something? And the nature of this kind of sucks today. Because there was a time, and I don't know what exactly is different now, but there was a time where you would get like the announcement of the code names for various systems, whatever they ended up being. Like if you remember the Dreamcast was originally announced, or it wasn't even announced. It was just that you had professionals working at professional journalists working at game publications, like Electronics Gaming Monthly, Edge, whatever. You pick your Game Pro if you were that. That was certainly a big one. And of course, PC Gamer. Not that they would talk so much about consoles at PC Gamer, but certainly one of the legends, and in some ways still is in the business. But you'd have like Game Pro come out, and they would talk about, Sega's working on the Neptune. Now, what was the Neptune? It was the Dreamcast, right? Which makes sense, because what was the system at the time? It was the Sega Saturn, and so the code name for the next system was going to be Neptune. I kind of wish they actually still went with that name, but whatever. Just like we knew that the Switch was originally going to be called the Revolution, right? It was called the NX Revolution. Which we know why it didn't stick with that name, because, in certain geographic areas and certain, cultures and languages, the letter V, doesn't come off so naturally. Right. So that I totally understand that, even though I think the name Revolution is so cool, and to have Revolution 2 would have been, amazing. Like it's such a cool name, and it so fits exactly what the Switch ended up doing. I still think Switch is a terrible name. I'm not surprised at all that this is called the Switch 2. Thank Satan it wasn't called the Switch U. That would have been a mistake of mistakes. But I'm not surprised by the official name at all. Most people were pretty much expecting that. Um, okay. But I don't know what happened to where we don't get like at least some of this insider news through at least somewhat verified publications. And I mean, because there's still good ones out there. It's not magazines necessarily anymore. But you have like Nintendo Life is pretty solid. VGM, you've got some other ones that you could go to. IGN is, owned corporate media, but whatever. Okay. There's places you could go where this stuff could like slowly get released. And I don't really feel like, other than the past couple months, basically ever since Dbrand, put out like the kind of the leaked announcement. And they did this on purpose because it's just, their business models to do kind of outrageous things. They put out the skin, or not the skin, but the case that they were developing for the Switch 2. So you'd heard about that. You'd heard some developers talking about it, and you had some information that, again, come this trailer that released on the 16th, we know now was accurate, right? Like the Joy-Con being magnetic, even though there are things about the Joy-Con that were clearly known, but also use cases that were not even imagined by, as far as I can tell, any supposed leaker or, whatever, you want to call these idiots. But anyway, we're kind of all over the place here. I'm just saying that this has been such an insane hype cycle, and I really think it could have been helped if it wouldn't have been as insane. Nintendo could have controlled things a little bit more, because we do know they were pissed at all the reveals that happened at CES around accessories and cases and everything that certain manufacturers were making for the Switch 2, that were, no, like we plan to show this off at CES, we're going to show it off, which also speaks to Nintendo clearly playing a little bit fast and loose on when the hell this thing was supposed to be coming out. Obviously, it's been in development for some time. Yeah, we're not going to get into the news, or there's some conversation that, well, there actually was supposed to be a Switch Pro at one point, but that got written off because of the pandemic or whatever the reasons happen to be internally. And that's why we ended up with Switch OLED instead, kind of a stopgap. But ultimately, the Switch 2 overall feels like a stopgap, but, I don't want to get too ahead of things, but I do want to talk about that. But the point I really want to drive home is that Nintendo could have controlled this more if they just gave a little bit of fucking information. Something. Not the little shit that they were, Fujikawa was putting out there at investor meetings. Give something fucking concrete, give us a code name, whatever. Like, even that would have been enough. But no, and I just don't know why the fuck, why the insane secrecy? It can't be just because, we want to make sure that we sell the maximum amount of Switch 1s, which I like being able to say that instead of Switches now. But selling the maximum amount of Switch 1s for the holidays. Like, I just can't believe that's it. And just like all they had to do to get people to shut the fuck up would have been give us a code name and, basically confirm to everybody, which I already knew I was already very confident that they were going to do, and confirm to everybody, yeah, we're going to be backwards compatible with physical carts and digital Switch 1 games. Which the trailer, by the way, did confirm. Now, it did say also that some Switch 1 games would not be compatible, and maybe they said accessories as well, but I think what they're pointing at with that is like, okay, yeah, Nintendo Labo isn't going to work with this thing. And who the fuck is surprised by that? Nobody. Right? Okay. But, this hype cycle existed because this is an incredibly anticipated product. You have what is effectively and could end up still being the best-selling game system in history. Beating out the DS, beating out the PS2, like those numbers are still coming, whatever Sony may want to argue back and forth against. And look, the PlayStation 2 deserves to be, at the top spot, but the Switch could take it. Okay. And considering how little the Switch can actually do, considering that, that it doesn't have so many apps, and what I mean by apps in the sense of like, it doesn't have Netflix, it does have YouTube, it has some, but it doesn't have anywhere near as much as the entertainment smorgasbord that say the Xbox Series does, or the PS4, PS5, etc. It's pretty amazing that it's sold so well, but maybe that's because of the very simplicity that attracts so many people, and that's certainly been a big part of Nintendo's MO. And does this product, let's start talking about the Switch 2 here. Does this product actually look really innovative? There's a couple things about it that could be, and those are like two of the main areas I want to focus on. Okay. But overall, no, it's literally just a bigger, shinier, perhaps slightly more well built and more powerful in the innards. We don't have a ton of confirmation on the innards. Long running theories would be that it's as powerful as a PS4, which is great. Some of the games that we have pretty good information on that would actually be coming out for the Switch 2 would be like Diablo 4. There's some rumor, some more than rumor around that, as well as Halo, the Master Chief Collection, which I think is actually a really cool idea that's going to be going cross-platform. And why not? John 117 isn't exactly lighting up the fires on Xbox sales anymore, unfortunately. And speaking as somebody who's actually a big Halo fan, which I am, it's time to, just like Sonic, it's time to take it cross-platform. It's not pushing your systems anymore because you're not making as great a games as you used to. And you've done flubs here and there. It's just the Mario effect is not there, even though, Master Chief is absolutely as recognizable a character as any in video gaming. But regardless, so, to be able to play those games, you got to at least be at PS4 levels of power. So we'll see about that. What is battery life going to look like, etc. We'll see about all that. We're not getting more news until, I believe, April 5th. Thank you for not doing it on an April 1st, Nintendo. But April 5th, 2025, we'll get more news about it, pricing, hopefully, as well as when it will actually launch. Are they looking at a summer release? Is it going to launch at the end of April? Whatever, who knows? We don't know. Okay, that's still anyone's guess. So the hype cycle is still going to run for a little while, but at least it's only going to be a couple months at this point. That said, so what do we know? We know that it's going to launch in 2025. We know it's bigger than even, I think it's bigger than the OLED model as well. And the Joy-Con are bigger, and the Joy-Con get into the very interesting story. Like we said earlier, also though, it is backwards compatible with most Switch games. Again, the ones I think that it wouldn't be compatible with are going to be the oddballs. The ones that have like odd accessories that are a part of the program. Again, for example, Nintendo Labo. I would assume Ring Fit Adventure would still work with it, but who knows? Which, I really hope they do. Actually, let me speak to that for a second. Any of those kinds of games, including fitness boxing, boy, I hope those still work, because those actually, you'll work up a pretty good sweat with those. I do I've played the King of the North Star fitness boxing. That is so great. And man, if you get into it, if you let yourself believe, I still believe. Got some Tim Capella there for you. If you get into it, you're going to feel it. You got to get into it, but you're going to feel it. So I hope those kinds of games are still compatible, especially like the King of the North, or Fist of the North Star, one, because that, just having that kind of IP with it really gets you into it more as well. And so I would hate for that, unless they're going to come out with just a second one. I'd hate for that to fall away. And even they just had Fitness Boxing 3 come out, which had a lot of really cool elements to it. And so anyway, point being, the games that aren't compatible, I really do think it's just going to be the oddballs. I think everything else is pretty much going to work just fine. 1, 2, 3 Switch and shit like that is still going to work. And, but it's the really, really odd ones that, and more experimental that might not. So yeah, kudos to them for making sure that happened. I think there would have been a riot if, there's people have put so much money, and I'm not even into collecting physical cartridges for the Switch. Okay. I'm really not into collecting physical games much in any form or fashion, unless it's like the PS2 or the PS3 where like I'm actually burning the games, but then I'm not really collecting at that point, am I? Like I'm not buying from somebody. Okay. But, people have put so much money into like these big, limited run game sets and everything, for some of these Switch physical releases that, I mean, again, you couldn't just ignore those people. Really, you just couldn't. I knew it. I'm like, no, like they considering how much Sony and Xbox, like allow for backwards compatibility. Like if Nintendo didn't do that, I know Nintendo likes to walk its own path. Okay. But if Nintendo didn't do that, they would have handed over so much to Sony and Xbox. And not only that, and this is going to get into a little bit of a subject that I want to discuss later, but not only that, a strange thing is happening in gaming right now that I want to talk about a little bit later. A strange thing is happening in that PC gaming, which used to be like the very lucrative but niche aspect of gaming, is gaining incredible ground to the point that like per dollar, more money is spent in digital purchases for PC gaming than it is for console gaming. That's a first. Basically, for games to sell more, to make more money on, we're not talking about hardware, because if you just judged it on hardware sales, like, and you include all PC parts and, NVIDIA cards and all this shit, like, of course, PC gaming has done more money forever, just by the nature of that, right? That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the amount of money that games make. They make more on PC now. I think it's like 52% to 48 compared to consoles. So Nintendo has to ask the question, wait a minute, why is PC gaming doing so much money? And I think for a lot of people, the reason is that like just the catalog, everything, the decades worth of gaming that you can play at any given moment. That's not even getting into emulators. We're talking just even PC native. Okay, games that you can play. People want that. Like that's becoming very attractive. And again, it's a subject I want to get into later, but Nintendo has to respond to that. And so having access, quote unquote legal access, okay, to the largest gaming library as possible is essential. It's crucial to continue to make money into the future for any kind of business in video gaming. PC is absolutely proving that right now. Okay. Again, we'll talk about that more later. But let's get into another part of this. Okay. So the backwards compatibility again. Yep. Of course. The new Joy-Con, this is where things actually get a little bit interesting. And I'm sure there's other things that, some people have said, oh, we might have spotted like a microphone on the Switch 2. Okay. Maybe it'll catch up with like all the shit that the 3DS could do. It doesn't appear that it had a camera at all, but we do have a USB-C port on there where things could get interesting. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. But let's talk about what we did see of the new Joy-Con. So they attach magnetically. This was something that was leaked ahead of time. We kind of had an idea that was happening, ended up being true. And there is a new button on it. Also, there's optical sensors. This is where things get fun. There's optical sensors on the Joy-Con themselves. And there's a point in the trailer, when you're watching the trailer, or the reveal trailer, where you see like two Joy-Con kind of racing next to each other. By the way, we did see what appeared to be Mario Kart 9 in that trailer as well. Great. Okay. It didn't look graphically insane, but doesn't need to be. And that's fine. But these two Joy-Con doing their business, zooming around, looked very much like mouse functionality. And that optical sensor apparently is much like a mouse sensor. And so you could use Joy-Con like a mouse. This is fantastic to have that ability, because we already know one of the games to come to the Switch 2 is, of course, is the Master Chief Collection, Halo. And here's the thing, like, let's just call it. For first-person shooters, even to some degree, third-person adventure games, Nothing beats mouse and keyboard as far as controls. Ever. Can't. The amount of shit that developers program into first-person shooter games for consoles to make them work half as precise as mouse and keyboard controls is ridiculous. And it's a lot. Gyro controls, all that shit. Okay? To actually have a mouse, that's a win. Now, this isn't the first rodeo for Nintendo to do that. And I'm not talking about the fact that they had a mouse for the Super Nintendo, right, that you could use with Mario Paint. Okay, yeah, that's great. No. I'm talking about how the Wiimote actually did for the Nintendo Wii actually did really well for first-person shooters. For example, the remake of GoldenEye that had Daniel Craig in it. One of the best games ever made, in my personal opinion. I mean, GoldenEye itself, the original, of course, for the N64, is one of the best games ever made. You're remaking it, you're just you're just piling on top of greatness, which is a good thing. Okay. The ability to just point the Wiimote at the TV and move your reticule was almost as precise as a mouse. And that worked really, really well for a lot of different things. Or even you think of the real-time strategy game, Little King Story, which is kind of one of the unsung hits for the Wii. And I think you can get that on PC now, by the way, on GOG. But, it worked for real-time strategy games. Why? Because the Wiimote basically could work like a mouse. Now, if your Joy-Con can do that as well, things get pretty wild at that point. I think that's really, really cool for a bunch of reasons. Another one of them being that, if we get into Pikmin 5 territory, then, we could actually play those games, which are basically RTSs and brilliant ones at that. Okay. We could basically play those with a mouse. Yes. Would it be easy for much like, Xbox does and PlayStations do, where you can just plug in keyboard and mouse into, say, the Switch dock or into the USB-C port or just connect them through Bluetooth? Yeah, that'd be great. But at least this way, now people have a built-in controller that will, that can simulate that functionality. Would I want to use a Joy-Con as a mouse compared to an actual mouse because it is certainly a weird fit in the hand? No, I wouldn't. But it's cool that they're at least seem to be thinking in that direction of allowing that functionality. And let's be clear here that Xbox and PlayStation have both, and even the Nintendo Switch, you can plug in a USB keyboard and USB mouse, and they're like a Hypnospace Outlaw and Quake, and I think even the Doom games, at least the remasters, you can play those with mouse and keyboard. There's a bunch of games you can do that on the Switch. And I'm hoping that becomes more and more popular because it's clearly becoming more and more popular in the rest of the console space. So that's really cool. Even just for first-person shooters alone. Another thing, another game that I think, or game series franchise that I think we can be pretty confident is going to come to the Nintendo Switch, basically because Microsoft has said it would, is Call of Duty. Now, I don't give two shits about Call of Duty, okay? I might as well call it Call of Duty, but that just, if you're going to start bringing those in, and if you can, make it a differentiator to have a built-in, basically, mouse functionality into the Switch, I think you're going to attract a lot of people into the first-person shooter kind of aspect. And that's not even saying that, again, another game that we're pretty confident is going to actually release for the Switch too, though it might be, some of these games coming out for 2025 might be, what we could call cross-generational, meaning that they could play on the Switch 1 as well as the Switch 2. My guess is that Mario Kart 9's lack of graphical impressiveness may be because it is cross-generational, like you can play it on the Switch 1 and the Switch 2, which only makes sense. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is shy, if not the best-selling game of all time. Why would you limit the barrier for Mario Kart 9 to perform just as well, by limiting it to one machine? That just doesn't make sense. But Metroid Prime 4 will probably be cross-generational, and I would love it if Metroid Prime 4 for the Switch 2 was able to actually use the Joy-Con with mouse functionality and have that new control scheme. That would be amazing. Now, these are the things we know. These are the things that we can confirm, from this very short, 2-minute reveal trailer. Okay, so more news coming in April. A theory going around that actually has me very excited. Okay. Am I excited about this console? We're going to talk about that next, but let's get this out of the way. As much as I don't like the hype cycle, this is basically just like, this isn't something that, oh, I heard Nintendo is doing this. It's, again, really just a theory. And that is, if this is a more powerful spec of USB-C on the Switch 2, which it likely is, okay? I mean, you got to understand, folks, like, there are times, more often than you realize, that manufacturers, electronics companies, they do things basically because larger companies, now is there a company much larger than Nintendo? Well, that's certainly something to bring up. I mean, yeah, sure, Apple, could go down some of the tech giants, but Nintendo's up there. If Nintendo wants something, they're going to get it. But many times, the components you find in your electronics are only there because it's what's available, not because it's what's best for it, right? For example, why are all smartphones, why do they all have huge fucking screens? Why? Because that's what's affordable to buy, because that's what companies like Samsung and Apple are ordering from the manufacturers. And so the manufacturers, if you want a 5-inch or a 4.5-inch screen or whatever, you're going to pay up, buddy, because that's not what we're set to manufacture. We're going to have to create a completely separate manufacturing process. So put up or shut up. And most companies just shut up. Okay. So my point in bringing this up is that, is this going to be a more powerful USB-C port? Yeah, probably. Why? Because the USB-C controllers available now generally are the higher end. Okay. So anyway, that's not always the case. But in the case of Nintendo, them wanting to make a quality product, which they do, that's likely what's there. So this USB-C port, I mean, I'm not saying it's like Thunderbolt 4 or 5 or anything like that, but it could be enough to where, and I mean, it wouldn't be Thunderbolt anyway. That's an Intel technology, but could it be USB 4? Well, that gets into, an interesting conversation. But bottom line is, it could be enough to where it could power a lot of interesting capabilities of this device, of the Switch 2, and it could power a lot of interesting accessories. One theory going around, because there was I talked earlier about how, okay, we didn't get any, we didn't get any like code names or anything along those lines, really. I mean, maybe we didn't, I just didn't hear it, but boy, you don't understand. I go to nintendolife.com every single fucking day, multiple times a day. All right. So it's rare that news doesn't, and I mean, that's just one site. I'm just saying it's rare that news does not cross my bow. Genuine news, not rumor, but genuine news about Nintendo. It's exceptionally rare that happens. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying it's really rare. Anyway. So, there was a patent put through 2-3 years ago for a dual screen, what looked like a Nintendo Switch. Basically that, like, it was like a clamshell style Nintendo Switch, at least with the screen. And obviously that's not what we're getting here. This in no way is a dual screen device. However, it could be that through the USB-C port and some kind of, like physical attachment adapter of some kind, whatever. Okay. It could allow for the Switch 1 to plug into, basically for their USB-C ports on both devices to join, and the Switch 1, your Switch 1 that you own right now, you might even own multiple of them. I do. Okay. I mean, it just happens, right? Even if you don't buy them, they somehow just end up in your lap. Multiple Switch 1s, or, if you have a Switch 1 right now, you could actually plug the Switch 1 screen, no Joy-Con, just the screen, plug it into the Switch 2, and then it would be dual screen, could potentially function like a clamshell, but more importantly, would be able to play DS games in a more native fashion. Not just DS games, but also 3DS games. And it's abundantly clear that Nintendo is, I mean, they're always digging in their back catalog, but they have been digging hard in their back catalog, especially for the 3DS. In fact, the latest re-release of Donkey Kong Country Returns, right, which was a Wii game, got re-released on 3DS, now re-released on the Switch 1. Like that's doing good money. So I think they see the value here. Okay. And that game was actually, and I still think at its best on the 3DS. But anyway, so that theory, and that's just theory, is a wild one. And even if Nintendo wasn't planning that, they better start doing it now. like fucking get on that, boys, because that's genius. Like that is such an incredible idea. And I mean, I love the idea of getting, even just upscaling 3DS games or upscaling, DS games or whatever like that. Oh man, what a catalog, because one of the things we were so close to, and might still happen on the Switch 1, is we almost had, as long as you have the Switch Online expansion pack, we almost had every single Zelda game on one system. And almost had every Metroid game on one system, right? What's missing? Metroid Hunters. I mean, we're sure Metroid Prime 2 and 3 are going to come eventually. Okay. And, maybe we don't want to remember Federation Force and, pinball would be fine if we want to bring on Prime Pinball. But anyway, by and large, like you're getting every major entry, right? Almost every major entry. And it would just take that dual screen setup to put that over the top for both franchises. So I really hope that happens. Like, I think it was just speculation. I don't think it was something that was like based on rumor. But again, if it's not true, Nintendo, make it true. Make it so, as Picard would say. Man. Okay, so all of that out of the way. How do I actually feel about this? I'll tell you something. If that dual screen affair is true, I mean, look, well, all right, let me finish my sentence. Then my excitement level is much higher. Really goes through the roof. Okay? Like that excites me a lot. Because I mean, you already have the touchscreens and everything, but here's the thing that I love about this idea. And one of the reasons I think they should do it, not just for the fact that you could have 3DS games and DS games play more natively, right? Without having to do like, reworking with the controls and whatever. It's not that. Okay. What actually, in my opinion, is really cool about that. Okay. And libertarians, you can go over here and cry because, you don't give a shit about the environment. That's fine. You go over there. Okay. Those of us that do, will stay right here. And what excites me about this is it's eliminating e-waste. And I haven't really heard anybody who's talking about this hasn't really talked about this. I think a lot of people will just suddenly think that their Switch 1s are useless once they get a Switch 2. And by and large, yeah, they kind of are. But if you make even just the tablet, and we haven't heard yet if the Joy-Con are going to be cross-compatible or cross-generational, like will Joy-Con 1s work with the Switch 2? We're not 100% sure. I imagine they would be. Nintendo's actually always been really good about that, right? Where GameCube controllers still work with the Wii. Hell, GameCube controllers with an adapter still are designed to work with the Switch 1, for fuck's sake. Or, the Wii U, or like the Wii U could use Wii, remote and nunchuck and so on. Okay. So I imagine Joy-Con 1s are still going to be largely functional with this, and great. I mean, they don't have the new whatever C button kind of thing on it, and they don't have the optical sensor, but for playing Switch 1 games, yeah, why wouldn't you have it still be compatible with the Switch 2? It's just fucking Bluetooth anyway. Okay, so that out of the way. But I mean, so your Joy-Con stay useful, and not only that, but like your Switch, basically your entire Switch, the screen and Joy-Cons are still useful going forward because they will allow you to, play games that require the dual screen setup, or they were designed for the dual screen setup anyway. I think that's such a dynamite idea. And I mean, from an environmental perspective, from an ecological perspective, it just makes sense to do. Make that functionality, so that we don't end up with just a bunch of waste. Oh, I'll just hand it down to my little kid. Yeah, well, your little kid's going to go to school and he's only going to have the Switch 1. He's not going to have the Switch 2, and he's going to be picked on to no fucking end. Okay, so did you really solve anything? No. Is the problem that we have such a trauma-based civilization, and and the parents are really the issue, not the little kids? Yes, of course, all of these things are true. But you know what I'm saying is also true. Just don't pretend like you did a grand favor. Okay, just understand the psychology of the prison system that is our schools. Thank you. Okay, off of my high horse and. And let's keep talking about video games. So if the dual screen thing is true, game on. Like I'm there for that, and I'm excited for it. Otherwise, you'd have to like put some really compelling games out there for me that only played on the Switch 2 at that. Okay, to really get me excited about the system. I'll admit it, I'm not in a hurry to get it at this point in time. For a couple reasons. Okay. I mean, if that dual screen thing ends up coming true, different story, like I said. But I'm not excited at this point in time. Because this isn't really, and I'm getting into full opinion here. Okay. This isn't really like, there's nothing blowing up my skirt here with this. Not really. Like, yeah, I think the potential mouse functionality of Joy-Con is a great idea. Like, genius idea. Okay. But it's not necessarily innovative, right? Because you could, which I can already do with the Switch 1, I can just plug in a mouse and keyboard. Okay. So it's not like that functionality can't be there already anyway. But there's nothing that really changes the game here, in my opinion. Not really. So, it's not like with the Switch where, I mean, I think what really moved Switch units, and yes, I know this was on the Wii U, and yes, even this is better on PC, and I'll get into that, was things like Breath of the Wild. Right? Like the idea, or even being able to play Skyrim on the go, or Diablo 3, or whatever. Like all of that concept of playing like these massive AAA games on the go, that was the revolution, pun intended, for the Switch 1. The Switch 2, as far as I can tell, has no revolution. Maybe, has no revelatory, no serious innovation. Maybe I'll be proven wrong in April. But as it stands right now, yeah, I mean, like, I'm glad it's finally coming out, more so just to stop the hype cycle. I'm glad that it's finally coming out. But at the same time, I mean, hey, when Metroid Prime 4 drops, like, maybe I'll be on it, okay? But ultimately, like, I'm not that crazy excited. And my back catalog, and I'm sure so many other commentators and listeners, that you feel this. My back catalog on the Switch 1 is insane. Stuff that I've never touched. Stuff that I've even double dipped on PC. Like, oops, I just knocked something over. Anyway, I get all hot and bothered about this. That was the lightsaber. Sorry. Good thing that's not real. It would have cut my desk in half. Okay. So if you're watching on YouTube, you know what I'm talking about. Or on Spotify, the video is there as well. Anyway, yeah, my back catalog is ridiculous. And ultimately, I don't really care about graphical fidelity. Like I don't need, just like Nintendo ultimately doesn't. Like, I don't really care how good the graphics are. Okay. I played Mortal Kombat 11 on the Switch for years. The game looks horrible on the Switch. I don't care though. I just wanted to play Mortal Kombat and I could do that. If Metroid Prime 4 comes out cross-generational, Mario Kart 9 comes out cross-generational, am I going to pick them up? Yeah, of course I am. But at the same time, I don't care. As long as they like the game functionality is exactly the same, I don't really give a shit about the graphics. Like, believe me, I really don't. There are games where I do care about the graphics, but these are gigantic games where I give a shit about the graphics. Okay. For example, like Age of Empires 2, or something like that. Like these really huge games. Like, yes, okay, then I want to see, especially when I'm dealing with a lot of really little characters, like in a real-time strategy game, then I want the graphical prowess. Okay. But by and large, no, I don't give a shit. Okay. So the Switch 1 will do fine for me for an incredibly long period of time because I have so many games that are exclusive to it at that. Yes, they'll be on Switch 2 as well, but my point being is I can't really play them on PC unless I boot up an emulator, and that's a whole other can of worms, and we're not going there right now. So regardless, yeah, playing them on the Switch 1. I was going to play them on the Switch 1 anyway, so why the fuck should it make a difference? Oh, they're going to boost them up to 60 FPS and 4K on the Switch 2 with some kind of upscaling. That just doesn't mean a whole lot to me. Now, I might be, in the minority with this, but I don't know how much I am. And it's funny, because if the Switch 2 wasn't backwards compatible, I might actually have been excited about it. But at the same time, I also would have hated it if it wasn't backwards compatible. So I'm not in a big hurry for this. Okay. Now, I can understand there are gamers where, their Nintendo Switch is their game system, and that's it. And so, yes, like they get the opportunity to have upgraded visuals, they're on it. And I completely understand where you're coming from on that. I mean, for me, minus some of my retro systems, okay, I was in the same boat for good 8 years now. Basically as long as the Switch has existed. Like the Switch, the 3DS and the Switch, those were my game systems, and that's it. I mean, yes, I could play classic games on PC for sure, but by and large, if I was wanting to play what was du jour, what was of the day, I was playing it on Switch. So, I mean, like the first time I played Diablo 3 was on Switch. I know some people are like, what? No, but that's just how it is. So that said, I understand where those kind of people, and I'm not saying that derogatorily. Again, I was one of you. Okay. With that kind of person, like I totally get it. Why this is that must have and exciting. Okay. But now I want to speak to what I mentioned earlier, what I teased earlier about PC gaming. And that is PC gaming is like eating the world. Now that Sony and Microsoft, both put their games on PC, like if you can afford it, and of course that's the big if, but even then that, the affordability of a gaming PC or even a gaming laptop is dropping significantly. And I'm not even talking about NVIDIA's release, of whatever their 50 series of cards that'll do, 4090 performance for $500. I'm not even getting into that. We'll even see if that's true. Okay. But, like what AMD can do with their AI9 series chips, with their Ryzen chips, like the built-in APUs and all, like, I mean, they do incredible performance, especially for what they cost, which is comparatively, relatively to gaming systems of the past, practically nothing. So the barrier to entry, okay, into PC gaming has never been lower. Into viable PC gaming, it's never been lower. And then you also happen to have a PC, that can do all the things that a PC can. So, I did an episode a little while back, a Real-Time Sovryn a little while back, about how consoles are dead. And yeah, they are. And part of the reason they are is that, and we don't even know what the cost of the Switch 2 is going to be. But boy, it better not be looking at like PS5 Pro prices because they're going to run into trouble. Because when you get into, PS5 Pro prices where we're talking like $700 or $800, whatever, I mean, yes, you can get a legit gaming laptop for that price or even a little bit less that you didn't even realize could be a gaming laptop. So PC gaming's eating the world. I mean, and you have to understand, it's not just about the catalog, right? Like I talked about the catalog earlier and how Nintendo knows they need to provide their back catalog. Otherwise they are going to lose people to PC gaming or wherever else they, or to other consoles. Okay. Just for the pure breadth of everything that can be played, be it from a nostalgia factor or just from, like a lot money spent factor, right? People don't want all their gaming library to go up in smoke just because a console died. That's what makes the PC so attractive, is that, no, if I want to play something from 30, 40 years ago, I can still do it. I could still buy it even. It's crazy. Go to GOG, hook yourself up. So you have to compete with that. But the one thing that I don't think they'll really be able to compete with, unless they're doing some wacky ass shit with the eShop, but even then they really can't do this, is the power of PC gaming is really comes down to modding. And I don't just mean modding as in like putting in nude mods into shit or, doing whatever else, but like people make whole new games out of pre-existing games that are a part of another universe, right? Or, you think, for example, like there's amazing remasters being done of like Elder Scrolls 4 of Oblivion, but they're using basically the engine, really the entire game of Skyrim. They're remaking Oblivion in Skyrim. So you can play Oblivion, but you're playing it with Skyrim mechanics. Consoles aren't doing this, and they can't. Ultimately, they really can't. Unless you're going to, log into them with like SSH or something, or they're going to make, mods like widely available like that. But a lot of times these amazing mods for PC, they are either a legal gray area or frankly, a black area. So yeah, I know there's an official Oblivion 4 remaster supposedly being worked on too. And hey, great. Like I'll listen to Patrick Stewart do his shtick. That's fine. But you get my point. Okay. Is that modding, the ability to fix games for fans, to fix the shit that developers do, or to do the things developers won't or can't afford to, or whatever, is what makes PC gaming so goddamn great. And consoles are never going to touch that. And Nintendo sure as fuck wouldn't let them. I mean, we know how they are around their IP. It's just not going to happen. Fortunately, Nintendo remasters their own stuff and generally does it with some good loving care. Okay, so I think that's why a lot of times they get a bit of a mental pass on people, and why they're still considered like a really like a viable option, alongside your gaming PC. But, you're just never going to match PC gaming with that. And this is what it, in many ways, it kind of comes down to, is the PC is the ultimate gaming machine. Forget about it even as being a PC. It's just the ultimate gaming machine. And, to say nothing of the emulators you can run, all this other stuff that you can do. I mean, it is insane. And they will last you a good long while. And usually they are somewhat, at least, user replaceable, depending on if you're doing desktop, modern laptop, whatever. Okay. So, like your money, there's no sunk cost. Like your money's not going to fall away when you do this. And to me, having, thanks to graciousness of listeners, having gotten a very, a very decently high end, and I mean, it's got an NVIDIA 4070 in it. Okay. And one of those AI9 processors, like I mentioned, gaming laptop, which is needed to make everything happen in the studio now. Okay. But regardless, like having that and being able to like jump back into some more high end PC gaming, which I haven't done in like a decade. Okay. Is, you realize kind of what you missed. And I'm not talking about the graphics. I am just talking about the scope of the games, the weirdness of the games, all of that most developers, most companies are not willing to risk on a console release. Or just the insane back catalog of games that, I've been playing my whole life. Because I used to be like an insane PC gamer back in the day, and you can't compete with it. And it almost makes the Switch superfluous. Literally the only thing making Nintendo still successful is the competitive pricing of their product, but also their exclusives. Without those exclusives, like this is why, like, no, Mario is not going to go to another console. Okay. Like they're not going to do what Sony and, and Microsoft are doing, because they become dead the instant that they open their catalog up to the PC in a legitimate way. They're dead. Or, like their console business is dead. Yeah, they could still make games, and I'm sure they'd still make a ton of money doing it, but it would be a whole different world. They know they have to hold on to this. But that said, I mean, there's so much, and not only that, but I mean, the other weird space that we're in is that like so many people are kind of copycatting like what a Nintendo game does and then just coming out with like a more raw version of it. And those are becoming very popular games. Like there was that Pokemon competitor. I can't even remember the name of it right now, but I know to a lot of people it's Pal World or something, but I know to a lot of people it really means something. Okay. Or Cassette Beasts. That's one I know that's really good. And so in some sense, like Nintendo's magic is kind of worn off just because the barrier of development, especially into the PC space and getting it to the market, is so low that you can actually, in some ways, compete with Nintendo. Now, you're never going to have Nintendo Sheen. That's why I said they're more of a raw form, right? Like you're never going to have Nintendo sound design, just the attention to detail that they had. You have to have a company the scope of Nintendo to be able to pull that off. Okay. But for a lot of people's gaming fix, it's going to be close enough. And they don't have to put down money on a new console. They're going to be on top of it. So please don't hear me as like I'm poo-pooing Nintendo. I'm going to be a Nintendo fanboy for life. Like I just cannot imagine anything ever changing that. Okay. And will I eventually get a Switch 2? Yeah, I'm sure it's just going to happen. And again, they make the right announcements and it's going to happen fast. Okay. But like right now, yeah, no, this didn't really excite me. And there's so much to play and do that is of such grander scope on other platforms, particularly say PC. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a while before I can even get to my Switch 1 back catalog. I mean, and this is a whole other thing. And this is something that Nintendo's really got to step their game up on. And I want to close off with this. Okay. That is, I had a lot of people. So I did the video about consoles being dead. Okay. Now, one of the points that I brought up in that, this was a very controversial video. One of the points that I brought up in that is with DLC for games, say like the aforementioned Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition. Okay. You can release DLC for 20, 30-year-old games and do insane money on that. Age of Empires is just one example, and it's not an oddity. This is true for, there are other games where this can be the case. And people will just keep paying for it. Now, I said that this could end up becoming far more the norm in that you don't get many new games developed. You just get DLC for games that have already been around forever, constantly getting developed. Now, I had some people give me some heat for that and say that's fucking ridiculous. But then what happened? It was so funny. Maybe a week after I said that, there was the Video Game Awards, and the Video Game Awards, the commission there, announced that DLC could be nominated for Game of the Year. It just proves my point. Like, yes, a game from 20 years ago, or even, say the year is 2040 or something, and if everybody's still here, the year is 2040, a game that came out today could still be getting DLC then and could win Game of the Year. That's the world we're in right now. They know that DLC is basically, I mean, again, just as an example with Age of Empires 2, they had that new Greece expansion, but it's not just an expansion. It's literally like an entire new game inside of the Age of Empires 2 engine. But it's sold as an expansion pack for $15. Insane. But it's a whole new game, completely new game. Hundreds of hours of gameplay. And so this is something that's coming. And I think Nintendo might want to pay attention to this because it's a way that other developers could really undercut what Nintendo does in the sense that you could basically sell new games for $15 instead of $50. Right? Because it's an expansion to a game that already exists. But because you didn't have to like redevelop the engine and come up with whole new mechanics and all that stuff, you can sell it at a much lower price point, and the lower price point could make up for, the volume in sales can make up for the cheaper cost. And I mean, it'll be interesting to see if Nintendo, dives deep, into the concept of DLC, which I think they failed with not providing any for Tears of the Kingdom. They've failed with that, in my opinion, with some other games as well. I mean, they did do it somewhat with Breath of the Wild, but this is another thing too. Like Breath of the Wild, where is that best? It's best on PC, right? Play Second Wind. That's not a fart joke. Play Second Wind. It's awesome. And I think it's part of why they sweat so much, about emulators. Because it's not just that you can play games that they sell, it's that you can build on top of the games that they make and make things that might be a little more compelling because they don't have the same filter that Nintendo does. I'm not saying Nintendo aren't the greatest game developers of all time. They pretty much are. Okay, might be a couple better, but but they pretty much are. But this is something they have to look at and they have to respond to, and that should be a major part of the Switch 2. Otherwise, I don't know what the fuck they're going to do, when it comes time for the follow-up to the Switch 2, which I don't even want to get started on that hype cycle. Okay, but this gets to my point that overall, this is a very safe release with the Switch 2. It's so safe at this point in time. Again, we might get some announcements that are not safe, which great. But it's so safe that it's uninteresting to me at this point in time. They announced the right stuff. Again, totally different story. But right now, like that trailer should have done a little bit more. But whatever, we'll see what ends up happening in April. Maybe they released this, and I could totally believe this, that they released the trailer just because of all the CES news, and it was just such a fever pitch, and to try and control the narrative some, they're like, fuck, we got to put something out there. And so they just put something quick out there, even though they didn't really plan on talking about it until, April. Or, again, they said they would announce something before the end of, the fiscal year, which would have been in March. April's close enough. Maybe that was the original idea and they just like their hand got forced a bit. Maybe. Regardless, they've got to announce some more, and maybe they will. But as it stands right now, not super exciting. I'm just not in a hurry to get this because there's so much left to do on Switch 1. Graphical improvements are not enough for me to want to jump on a new system. You got to give me good reasons. And I don't really have any yet. Especially when I also have a gaming PC. If I didn't have a gaming PC, different story. Then I'd be like, oh yeah, give it to me now. Give it to me now. I need the latest. You know what I mean? But that's where we're at. So I will end that here. And, as more news comes out, and again, I'm not going to be like pushing rumor shit. Okay. But as more news comes out, probably in April, unless they do something ahead of that somehow out of nowhere, I won't talk about it much else, but hey, you got an hour of me flapping my yap on it. So with that said, I will see all of you, on the other side.